Welcome to the Ricky Matthews Show from the Citizens Bank Studio. Hope you're having a great day as we continue to celebrate all the wonderful people who are making Mississippi such a great place to live, work, and play. I say that every day, and man, I mean it. And it takes so many wonderful people working together in the trenches to make this such a great place. And so I'm looking actually forward to today's show because we're going to be joined here in just a second by my friend Ashley Edwards, the former CEO of the Gulf Coast Business Council. He's an entrepreneur. He's involved in a bunch of different stuff. I love my conversations with Ashley because we don't have an agenda when we come to the table to have these conversations. We just talk about what's on our minds, and he and I pay close attention to a lot of different stuff. And I always love to come to the conversation with no agenda and just see where it goes. So without any further ado, let me bring my friend Ashley Edwards. He's an entrepreneur, spending a lot of time all over the Gulf South these days, doing amazing things in his business. It's good to see you, my friend. How you doing?
I'm doing great, Ricky. Thank you for having me today. Good to see you as well.
It's good to see you, man. Look, I've been following you guys. You're having a lot of success. It's been fun watching you, but you had a vision for what you were going to do when you left the Gulf Coast Business Council after working for most of your career in government or nonprofit work. You obviously had played a critical role after Hurricane Katrina, working for Haley Barbour and then for Governor Phil Bryant. But all of that was just great experience, including the Gulf Coast Business Council CEO, for what you're doing today, isn't it?
It was, we work in public finance and grant administration. And what we're really there to do is help communities develop themselves, whether that's through attracting new business and helping to put deals together so that new business, new commerce can come into an area, whether that's working on the government funding side, trying to get government grants to do things like infrastructure or hurricane recovery. And a lot of it is what I did for 20 years here on the Gulf Coast. And so now we're doing it in communities, cities, counties, really across the Gulf South. And, there's more work out there than we can get to. There's more to do than we have the capacity to do, but it's very fulfilling, and it's amazing to work with such a cross section of this region, and mayors, city council members of boards of supervisors, looking at local priorities and how you bring the resources together to help these communities grow and thrive. And I love waking up every morning. It's a lot of fun to do.
Well, I think people who are regular listeners of this show have a sense of this when I talk to local mayors, and when they're super excited about an economic development project of some sort. Usually there's probably some federal money that's involved. There's obviously local money involved. There may be state money involved. There could be TIF bonds, incremental financing bonds involved. It could be all kinds of different stuff. But that's what it takes to be successful. So, knowing how to get to that money, knowing how to administer that money, knowing how to put that together with maybe some big developer that may be coming in to do a shopping center or some big other development. I mean, that's the key to success for most communities these days, isn't it?
Well, it really is. And I mean, look, it's not always glamorous work. I mean, sometimes it's just the nuts and bolts of hard infrastructure. If you're going to build a $200 million retail center in a community that hasn't had that type of development, it takes a lot of water systems and sewer systems and roads and traffic lights and all the things that ultimately have to come along to make that commerce go. And so, we're really at the ground level of that, making sure that all these things can happen and seeing these things to fruition. And of course, a real passion of mine and of yours as well, based off of our experience with Hurricane Katrina, is rebuilding these communities after natural disasters hit. Seeing communities go through exactly what we did here in Mississippi, Ricky, which is knowing that they're going to have resources coming in to build back bigger and better than they were before the disaster hit, and helping them see that vision realized. And, it's not something that happens a month or 6 months or a year. I mean, in some cases, these are 4 and 5 and 6 year projects to see these things come to a realization. But it really is very fulfilling to see that and to know that you're having an impact in communities being something more than they would have been otherwise. And, one of the things I tell all these folks, Ricky, and you know this probably as well as anybody, given your years with the Sun Herald and the work you did after Katrina, and even the work you did in Alabama after the oil spill and in New Orleans. These disasters are horrible when they hit, and people can't comprehend a future in which they will ever look back and say, we're better off now than we would have been had that not happened. But seeing them realize that over time and seeing them come back to the table and say, wow, this is, even with this terrible calamity, there's so much opportunity that we never would have seen otherwise. Watching that happen the way we saw in Mississippi, it's very fulfilling to see that over and over again.
Well, I think the point about post-disaster, it's interesting because a lot of the skill sets and the institutional knowledge that you gained through having worked across so many different dimensions of government and nonprofit is you've gained an understanding of the role that state and federal government can play in normal everyday economic development that can and does occur, but that a lot of those same things are the things you call toward after a disaster. And what's interesting is that a lot of communities, you would think that communities as a general rule would know these things, that they would grow their own institutional knowledge around this, or that every state would know these things, that they would grow their institutional knowledge around this. But the reality is new people are elected and they bring new people in. And so oftentimes it is the case that the people who are in those roles, while they're passionate and they love their communities and they're capable and all of these things, they really don't have the experience. They don't really know the right question to ask. They really don't know where those buckets are. They don't know. And even on the federal government side, this is true with FEMA as well, because FEMA has a lot of new people that work for them. They don't always give the right answers or the best answer. And having someone who has that institutional knowledge that dates back as far as you and your team's information dates back, man, can you imagine the powerful partnership that creates? I mean, of course, you know that because that's what you do. So it's not just in the course of normal economic development, but also after disasters. And incidentally, speaking of that, when we get back from break on the other side, we're going to talk about how likely your company is going to be busy in the wake of this hurricane season. It'd be interesting to hear what you have to say about it. So we'll cover the hurricane part of this when we get back on the other side. But it's true, this notion of developing institutional knowledge, and then that's bringing that to folks in a calm way to say, hey, we got a lot of debris to get up. You got to align your team. You got work to do here in the short term. Our goal is to help you get focused once that fog goes away over the long haul. And look, Ann and I were at church. I mentioned this on the show a couple of weeks ago. We were at church a couple of weeks ago, and they were doing some paving in Biloxi. We were over on the point, and here we are. How many years? How many years has it been?
20 years next year.
Almost 20 years. Think about it. And we're still rebuilding infrastructure. But that's what it takes, though, Ashley, isn't it? And helping people understand that, man, take a deep breath. We got a long haul ahead of us. And so this is going to be a marathon, not a sprint. You say that a lot, don't you?
All the time. And Ricky, you hit the nail on the head. The toughest thing when you arrive in a community that has just experienced a disaster is getting the local leadership to be able to look beyond just the short term, as you called it, kind of the fog of war of, all of the things that have to be done immediately, and put in place a long-term vision. Because the success or failure of any disaster recovery effort it's not going to depend on what happens in the first 2 weeks or the first month. It's a marathon. And in many ways, the decisions that are made early on can affect where you are towards the end of that marathon. But having an eye towards that long-term recovery is so incredibly important. And it's easy to ignore that. When you're under a 30-foot pile of debris, it's hard to think about sort of community sustainability over the next 10 years. But every decision that is made when you have that eye toward the future, it ultimately counts. And It's amazing to see the folks that do it well and the type of results they have. They can really change a community for generations to come. I mean, the stakes are incredibly high.
It occurs to me, Ashley, if you're not already doing this, and you probably are, but I'm thinking about Haley's book, America's Great Storm, and the wonderful lessons that are detailed in that book. I'm so fortunate to have had the opportunity to write the foreword to it. But the time for people to contemplate the lessons in this book are before they get hit by a natural disaster. So I would think that anyone who up the East Coast or in the Gulf South that could be the target of a hurricane, unfortunately, somebody's going to get hit by a major at some point in the future. That they should look at the lessons learned long before they get hit, so they can know once they get into the aftermath, here are the orderly steps I need to take to get to where we need to go. That would be, I think, some valuable information for every leader to have. Hey, listen, when we get back on the other side, we'll talk about this hurricane season and how Ashley's business is probably going to be cranking, unfortunately. We'll see you after this break. Welcome back to the Ricky Matthews Show from the Citizens Bank studio. We have a former CEO of the Gulf Coast Business Council. He's an entrepreneur. He works in economic development and in disaster recovery, among other things. And he hit the ground running when he left the Gulf Coast Business Council. And it's great to stay in touch with Ashley because he has a kind of a finger on the pulse of really the Gulf South region, for that matter. Ashley, as I mentioned before we went to break, in your disaster recovery part of your business, I suggest to you that you better start thinking about how you ramp up because it's going to be a busy hurricane season. You're a weather watcher like I am. You're a tropical nerd, the same as I am. And lots of people have sent me private notes to say how concerned I am about this season. And the truth is I'm really concerned about this season, unfortunately, because the water temperatures in the main development region of the Atlantic and in the Gulf of Mexico right now are as hot as they are in August. That's not good. And look, we're pre-recording this show. It's running on Tuesday. It's likely, actually, as this show is airing, that there could be a storm in the Gulf that we're watching, or one that's soon to be developing, because of this sort of contributing atmospheric condition with this South American gyre and a tropical wave and the conditions coming together. We could actually have a storm in the Gulf. And if we don't, certainly the conditions were there when we started to do this show. And it's just more of the same. I think we're going to see models after model after model for the rest of the season, all the way into October, saying the same thing, and that is conditions are favorable for tropical system development. And I'm concerned about it. I know you are too.
I'm as concerned this summer, maybe as any summer that I can remember in a decade or more. And you're right. I mean, all of the ingredients are there this year to see activity that's off the charts. Look, we can get a bad storm in any year, whether these ingredients are there or not, but the chances of it are just so much higher now than they would be in other years that we've seen recently. And, it's alarming when you look at the water temperatures out there in the main development region of the Atlantic, when you look at the loop current coming into the Gulf, the temperatures off the Florida coastline. We're seeing water temperatures in the Gulf right now where they would be normally in late August. And we just hit the month of June. And so, think about where we are right now. Think about where we're going to be in August and September. Given these conditions and what climatologists think will continue to happen too, this could also be one of those seasons where we see those late storm threats into October and November. And so, this is not going to be something that, come the end of August, hey, we can start, kind of taking our guard down a little bit. This can be one of those historic seasons. It likely will be. We don't know if we're going to get one here, but chances are somewhere along the central Gulf Coast there is going to be a major hurricane impact this year. You've talked a little bit about our business and what we do, and now we have got clients that span from Louisiana all the way over to South Florida, and so the scary thing for someone like us is knowing that likely one of our clients is going to be impacted before this summer is over, and even possibly our home. It's going to be a tough year, and the chances are certainly higher than what we would see in a normal season. So I think this is the time for everybody to be very aware, to have their plans in place. For folks out there that have thought about, maybe this is the year I'll put hurricane shutters, or maybe this is the year I'm going to reinforce my doors so that the winds won't blow them open. I mean, this is the time to do it right now. In my personal life, that's one of the things I'm doing right now is looking at our exterior doors and how do we reinforce those, because it's never too early to start being prepared.
There is no doubt about it. Listen, you probably saw this. Josh Morganman, the top hurricane chaser in the world, who lives in L.A., but he also built a house in Bay St. Louis and recently had a housewarming party. And it was so interesting, man. He had all the major storm chasers from around the world, including, James Reynolds came over from Japan, and Jim Cantori was there, and all these famous storm chasers coming together. Josh, being the, if there were a book, Guinness Book of World Record, he would own it for the number of times he's been in the eye wall of a hurricane around the world. And he's a good friend, and he'll be on my show next week. But the buzz among the group is that they will see each other again. And I noted on the GFS runs, they're already starting to communicate with each other about how they may be meeting at some point. I mean, already in June. So, it's troublesome. But I think the message, I had the emergency management folks from Mississippi on. And as you know, Andrew was an A storm, but it was a late season storm. Right. All it takes is one. That's what we got to remember. All it takes is one. So whether it's a busy year or not so busy year, the reality is all it takes is one. And I used to think this way, Ashley, that you start talking about, and I've read this too, about the late season situation, October, maybe even into December, and how these conditions could create late season storms. I used to think that October, once you get into October, the fronts start coming down and they'll spin them off into Florida or to Cuba or whatever. But then Zeta kind of changed everything as it relates to that. And Zeta was a butt kicker, man. I mean, Zeta was a very unusual storm. It just goes to show that a late season storm in coastal Mississippi can be significant. It was a good test for us, I might add.
Right.
But still a butt kicker.
Absolutely. And I mean, all it takes is a storm getting far enough west ahead of a frontal boundary coming in that will steer it right into us. And I think the other thing that bears saying, Ricky, is, that not only the quantity of storms that are being forecast this year, which could be another record-breaking year, but the opportunity for rapid intensification to occur with these storms. And so, a storm that can pop up in the Gulf and within 48 hours be at a major hurricane strength category, that's something that will be more possible this year than what we often see, because the conditions are such that once these engines start going, they can rapidly intensify very quickly. And so the opportunity to see major hurricane impacts along the central Gulf Coast are going to be incredibly high. And just given the steering patterns and kind of the upper atmospheric setup this year, we probably have less likelihood of impacts on the central Atlantic coast and a greater likelihood of impacts along the central Gulf Coast or along the Florida Gulf Coast. And so we've got to be really aware this year. I think I saw something this morning in which some of the folks at Colorado had said the state of Mississippi was going to see like a 73% chance of being impacted by a tropical cyclone this year. I mean, 73% chance is off the charts. So doesn't mean it's going to be severe, doesn't mean it's going to hit where you are head on, but the fact that we will likely have some impacts from something this year, it's really off the charts.
I think, for people who are listening who need to get, just recalibrated that, hurricane season has started. Yeah, the prognostications aren't good. For people who are new to this area, they need to hear this as well. But, you think about rapid intensification. There are a lot of examples, incidentally, that we could pull out. But the one that I think everyone zeroes in on is Hurricane Michael.
Yes. Because
those folks went to sleep with a relatively disorganized hurricane. They woke up with a major, and it just intensified so rapidly, and the damage it did was significant. And That's what can happen. And I think what we need to do, and the reason for even pointing that out, is not to scare people or to get you worried about it or any of those things. It's actually to get you focused on what your plan is. The time to have a plan is not after the storm or after we learn the storm's about to hit us. Now's the time to have a plan. Especially, I was so struck and saddened after Hurricane Katrina. Too many older people who didn't have family here to urge them to get out died in that storm. So we got to reach out to our neighbors. We got to be aware of our neighbors and make sure they know what the situation is. And if you live here but your family lives somewhere else, create some kind of a communication link with them so that they can help you get out if you need to get out. But know what you're going to do, where you're going to go, especially if you're asked to evacuate. And know that you've got to have your self-sustaining capabilities for, I don't know, they say 3 days, at least 3 days, but it probably ought to be 3 to 5 days. That means prescriptions and water and food and all the things the essentials in life. I mean, one of the things he pointed out to me is that he was talking to someone. This is one of the officials from the Mississippi Emergency Management. Said he was talking to someone. They said, "Well, we've got plenty of canned goods and blah blah blah." He said, "Okay, what about a can opener?" And of course, it dawned on him that the only can opener they had was one that you plug in. So it's kind of the basic stuff. That's why I think the best thing to do is go to the internet, search hurricane preparation. You'll see all kinds of stuff from Mississippi, from local management folks, really from around the United States. Read those and develop your own plan. Understand what you're going to do to save life and property, and you'll be glad you did. But don't wait to a storm is barreling down on us before you do that. We'll close that part of the conversation when we get on the other side with Ashley Edwards, former CEO of the Gulf Coast Business Council. He's an entrepreneur in economic development, disaster recovery stuff, really other stuff as well. And we'll talk. We'll kind of shift gears, talk about the latest on Twitter, and I want to talk about the woke situation in America today. See what Ashley's thoughts are about that. We'll see after this. Welcome back to the Ricky Matthews Show from the Citizens Bank Studio. We have my friend Ashley Edwards, the former CEO of the Gulf Coast Business Council, and he's an entrepreneur these days, working throughout the Gulf South. And I think it's cool watching you guys do your thing. You're going to have you already had tremendous success, but the sky's the limit on the kind of work that you guys are doing, and you're just tailor-made for this. It's been awesome to watch. Hey, listen, you and I have had a lot of conversations about Twitter. And the world came to a stop the day that Elon Musk sold it. And you and I said from the very beginning, don't worry about Elon Musk. Don't worry about Twitter. What we knew he was going to do is he's going to take these bias algorithms out. He was going to let free speech kind of run its course. He's going to hire a great CEO, which he did. They're going to build in some ability to validate content, which they've done, and on and on and on and on and on. And now Twitter's, number one by far in the world where people go to get information. And listen, I like having to sort through some trash to get to the news. I don't want someone doing that for me, because when someone does that for me, that means what they're spinning back to me is their view of the world. I don't want to see their view of the world. I want to be able to do it myself. I think Twitter has just blown and gone, and you don't hear many criticisms of Elon Musk these days. I mean, they're not focused on him now. They're worried about him as a competitor, but you don't hear as much crap these days as you did. What's your view on kind of where he is today?
Yeah, I mean, I think you're absolutely right. I think you're starting to see some of that long-term vision and plan unfold. The short-term reactions to these things are always kind of pointless because, these stories play out over years, not months. And, a guy like Elon Musk is hard to bet against. I mean, he's not got a track record of a lot of failed businesses by any stretch of the imagination. But there again, I mean, I think he's, and look, I personally believe, and I think you probably believe this as well, Ricky, all of these things right now are, they're all sort of going to be ultimately, their success or failure is going to ultimately be judged on how they lay the groundwork for the integration of AI, which is going to change everything about our world and our economy and our commerce and our social media and our interactivity. And we're living in the dawn of that right now. The world that we wake up in 5 years is going to be so much vastly different than what any of us can comprehend. And I think that is where Elon Musk has a real competitive advantage, because he's been an AI pioneer, and he's so invested in the development of these AI systems and the integration of these AI systems. And so, what we see with Twitter today is going to be a shell of what we're going to see in 24 months from now, with all the way that these things are going to change. And so, we're going to see a whole group of companies that are going to lead this effort, companies that may not have necessarily been on the radar, that are going to be the next titans of business and industry. We're going to see companies that have been incredible leaders over the past decade or the past 20 years that are going to fold up in the next 10 years because they don't keep up and they're not competitive and innovative. And so, we're going through an economic cycle right now where there's going to be winners and losers. And it's clear that Elon Musk is trying to position Twitter to be a winner, not to just compete with Facebook, but to be an everything app with AI integration that can help become a platform for the next generation of online commerce. And I think that that's clearly where he's headed.
Yeah, I think you're right about that. I can't agree more. And for people who have not been paying attention to artificial intelligence and the conversations and debates around it, it's this nebulous thing that's out there that we don't really have to pay much attention to. It's changing your life right now, and you don't even know it. It was being used, incidentally, already in things like determining what our news content was going to be in things like Facebook, for example. But that's just the beginning, man. I mean, when you start to look at what is possible on every single dimension, that's why you see Microsoft and Google laying off employees and rehiring a whole different set of employees around artificial intelligence. Look, I watch my own. I think of my own sort of how I use AI. I do a lot of research. Just because I have this show. I want to be knowledgeable, but I do a lot of research because I'm a human sponge, man. I want to learn new things. I want to see what's going on. I do a lot of comparisons, incidentally, between Google searches and what I get from AI. And buddy, I'm telling you something. The amount of time I spend on Google today versus the amount of time I spend in AI is dramatically different than it was even 2 months ago. It's dramatic because here's the thing. Just in the past few months, AI, open source AI, it's gotten better. It's gotten more current. For a long time, it wasn't even current. Now it's current. It's unbelievable. And then you think about Elon Musk and what he's doing with Tesla, developing some of the most sophisticated AI there is. He gets how all these pieces fit together. So he's not doing it in a vacuum. And by the way, for people who are not aware of this, this open AI that we all talk about, Elon Musk is the brainchild behind that. He left it because he felt like the people who are running it wanted to commercialize it. They were getting dangerous with it because AI has tremendous implications. And the other thing is they were building bias into it. I'm going to give you an example of that here in just a second. But it's going to change the world, man. It's changing. It's going to change business. It's going to change technology. There probably hasn't been a more significant technological advancement that's so quickly going to change the course of history than artificial intelligence.
No question about it. I mean, look, and you could not be more spot on. I see it in my life every day. I'll give you a perfect real world example of that. Over the course of this weekend, my wife and I have 2 dogs, a French bulldog and an English bulldog. They've got some skin allergies. We were worried that the food they were on was making their allergies worse. I did a Google search and sat there for 45 minutes trying to find the best foods to feed them to deal with these allergies and so forth. And I was getting all these different articles written by different people with 100 different things in it. And I finally just said, you know what, I think I'll go on AI and just see if it can help me. And I found a chat GPT associated with veterinarian scientific research papers that looked at like 200 million pieces of scientific research and literature, told them exactly what skin allergies they had, what my breeds were, what their age was. It asked me a couple of questions and immediately spit out exactly the information I needed about here are the types of brands and the food and the reason that it solves their skin allergies. And then I even asked, I said, well, can you send me a link to where to buy it? And boom, it spit out links. Here's where you can buy them, and here's where they're on sale. And I thought, oh my God, Google could never do this. It could never process this information and condense it and give you exactly what you need. And so I'm finding the very same things, which is, all of these amazing, massive companies like Google that sort of built our new commerce off of this search engine infrastructure are going to be obsolete before we can even look up. I mean, it really is incredible.
And can you, ABC, excuse me, the corporation that oversees Google, can you imagine what their conference rooms feel like these days as they contemplate already the metrics they're looking at in their business? I mean, they're seeing the changes taking place. I mean, it's like just in the short time that Twitter became X after Elon Musk bought them, there's a slight drop off initially, and then it just sped back up again. You don't think the New York Times and Washington Post and everybody else are not watching what's happening on X? Same thing's happening at Google and Microsoft and all these other companies as they watch what's happening with AI. And I mean, it's going to transform their business. It's going to happen so quick. It's going to be a little bit like, no more blockbusters, being seen around anymore. It's that dramatic, man. I mean, you're talking about sea change. It's happening right in front of our eyes, and there is no turning back now, bro, is there?
There's not. And, I think it's interesting for people to know that, what we're seeing right now really is an AI arms race with all the big tech companies. I mean, whether it's Microsoft or Google or OpenAI or X or Facebook, or, you could go on down the list, Amazon, where all of their capital investment is going and all their R&D focus is going right now is AI development and integration. I mean, all these companies understand that AI is going to completely change the market. And so that is where all of their time and energy is being spent. And OpenAI has sort of, come out as the stalking horse in this race so far. Of course, Microsoft has put a lot of investment in that, but Google has also come out with their Gemini, and they're starting to integrate. You see what Microsoft has done with Bing and their search engines. All of these search engines that have been sort of these legacy search engines that we've used now for a generation, we're going to wake up 2 years from today and they're all going to have AI backbones behind them, and they're going to work fundamentally differently because that's where it's all going. And so whether we like it or not, and AI is a scary thing, no question about it, but it is on us and it is not going away.
The thing that's concerning, I'll give you one example when we get on the other side. What's concerning about it is the same as we learned when Elon Musk bought Twitter, and then changed it to X, and then opened up the kimono to let us see the bias that was built into the algorithm. We're seeing the same kind of bias being built into AI, and I don't want that. So it'd be interesting to see your point of view about that. When we get back on the other side, we'll continue our conversation with Ashley Edwards. Welcome back to the final segment of the Ricky Matthews Show from the Citizens Bank studio. We have my friend Ashley Edwards, the former CEO of the Gulf Coast Business Council, who is also an entrepreneur involved in economic development, disaster recovery, and other things all around the Gulf South. So he's someone I enjoy staying in touch with. He's well-read, and it's fun to have conversations with him about what's going on in the world today. One of the things, Ashley, as we talk about AI, of course, the dangers of it, we could spend a whole show on that, but then there's also this notion of bias being part of the AI. And I already knew this to be the case because I've tested it a couple of times, but Elon Musk is worried about it too. And as I mentioned, one of the things he did in opening up the kimono of Twitter was showing and demonstrating to all of us that bias was definitely built into the algorithm, and he's worked to take that out. But I did a search. What I wanted to know was, I said, I'm going to have a conversation with Ashley Edwards, former CEO of the Gulf Coast Business Council. May talk about hurricanes and blah, blah, blah. I gave a couple of things. And then I said, what are some other things we can talk about? Well, number 2 on the list was diversity, equity, and inclusion. That's the last thing that I would have come to mind for me and you to have a conversation about. But look, here's the thing. I'll tell you where I stand on this. I think diversity is extremely important. Diversity of thought, diversity of background, all these things are important. But I really believe this, that too much focus on diversity, equity, inclusion, it takes us away from what we should be really focused on, which is meritocracy. That's the way the NBA works. That's the way pro baseball works. That's the way the NFL works. The best positions get the positions. Okay, the best at those positions get those positions. Why should business be any different? Why should the military be any different? I mean, we should have the best, and we should have fighters who are wanting to win. I believe that the political correctness and the council culture has been a real detriment to America. And you're seeing Democrats and Republicans alike saying we have swung this pendulum too far. We have stifled free speech, and we don't appreciate open dialogue the way we need it, the way we used to. I think politically and policy-wise and otherwise, it's a debate and conversation we should continue to have. But the fact that when I do a search in AI that brings that back as the number 2 thing you and I should be talking about, I don't think that's a good example of unbiased, answers coming out of AI.
Well, I think you're absolutely right from the standpoint that, this is really the undercurrent that underlies everything we see in our current politics. I would argue, Ricky, that if it had not been for sort of the political pushback against cancel culture and political correctness, the way the culture wars have taken hold, especially in new media, you probably don't have a Donald Trump presidency if it's not for that bounce back. And politics is such that it's so cyclical, and oftentimes we will see overcorrections to either side. And I think that it's something that political scientists that live 50 years from now will look back on our times, and they will look at how sort of the response from voters to the push towards wokeness, if you will, or political correctness really gave rise to a lot of what we see in our politics today. And I think a lot of it is very dangerous on both sides of the equation. I think sometimes the cause and the effect are equally disastrous for our society. I think oftentimes the overcorrections can kind of be as devastating to us as the things that got us there in the first place. But that being said, there's no question it is one of the major driving forces behind the political situation that we see right now in the United States, and it's not going anywhere. I mean, I think, and it's encapsulated in so many specific things that we see. I mean, think of, for example, Ron DeSantis's battle with Disney, for example. I mean, that's kind of a classic case of where you see that playing out in real time. It's central to our presidential race. This is probably the first presidential race that we've had in my lifetime or your lifetime that really won't be about any big overarching issues. It will primarily be based in issues about culture war and personalities of candidates and kind of this nya gotcha back and forth. We're not talking about big international policy or domestic economic policy or tax policy. That stuff it's really nowhere to be seen. And so, are we better off as a result of this? I don't think so. And you're absolutely right in the sense that you look at the biases that are being built into social media algorithms, that are being built into AI, the difficulty, for example, that people would have seeing your show come up on a news feed on Facebook because the algorithms say, well, this is a conservative channel, and so therefore we're going to de-emphasize it. I mean, all of those things are not going away, and they will continue to see pushback from the American populace as a result. So this is here to stay with us for a while.
Hey, what's interesting, and then we'll have to end on this, but it has created a culture of fear and self-censorship, and I think that's been very inhibiting to creativity and innovation. Incidentally, as it relates to the algorithm and the conservative show that SuperTalk is, they made a change in the algorithm a couple of weeks ago, and now I've had a show just recently hit 1,000 views, and regularly they're getting 300 to 500 views. I mean, something changed. They changed in the algorithm because they're listening and they're preparing for, I guess, the future political situation, and they're realizing they're going to get caught if they continue to try to suppress one side over the other. So much more to talk about. Next time we get together, I want to talk to you about men competing against women. How did we get in this position? We'll also talk about the border and what's happening there. But for now, it's been a pleasure, my friend, to catch up.
Ricky, thank you. It's always a pleasure, and it's great seeing you today.
You bet, man, my friend. Ashley Edwards, former CEO of the Gulf Coast Business Council. Have a great day, and we will see you tomorrow.